When I wrote the review, it was after traveling around the province of Ontario as far north as Thunder Bay to London to Ottawa to various locations around the province, as well as soliciting dozens and dozens of documents from Ontarians. And what it became very clear very quickly was that these people just felt left behind. And so it was very clear to everyone involved in the project that the claims of progress really were a mirage.
Talk to me about how ableism plays a role in all of this. You know, the goal of Ontario is to be accessible by 2025. Talk to me about how ableism plays a role in that.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because when I took office as Lieutenant Governor in 2007, I really did not believe that ableism played any kind of a significant role in discrimination against people with disabilities. I thought it was a series of other factors. And I felt that back then that, if businesses were convinced, and the statistics all bear this out, surveys and studies prove this, multiple surveys, multiple studies, that persons with disabilities simply make better employees. They stay on the job longer. They have fewer days of absenteeism. They're harder workers. All the characteristics that would make a boss want to hire someone. And yet, notwithstanding the multiple examples, the employment rate for people with disabilities was still just a fraction of what it is for the general public. And so over time, I started to look more and more during my term into the term ableism, which is discrimination against disabled people. Essentially, that's what it is. And, in our society, there's so many isms that we have to cope with that I can understand why people might just look at this relatively new term of ableism and go, oh, well, what's this? But it wasn't until I watched a video online at a TED Talk by a Paralympian by the name of Amy Mullins that really hit home to me. But at one point, she decided to look up the word disabled in the dictionary just to see what she could find. And she was not sure what she was going to find. And what she found was dozens and dozens and dozens of pejorative terms that we use every day in our culture. And she said, this is what ableism is all about. It's just part of our daily language, unfortunately. So we'll refer to someone doing something unusual and say, well, they're crazy.
Yeah.
Or they're nuts. And that's an insult to the mental person, the person with a condition of their brain. Or that's so lame. And even in baseball broadcasting, there's an ugly phrase that they use, and that is that the situation is a cripple shooter. So we have to watch what we say, and we really do need to look into what the multiple phrases are as it relates to people with disabilities.
Yeah. David, we only have a couple minutes left before we take a break, but I want to get to this question because it is so pertinent on what's happening today. There have been alarms sounded by advocates in the disability community when it comes to the changes in legislation around medical assistance in dying. Some saying it is now more easier for a person with a disability to die with assistance than it is to get a job or proper assistance in the country. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, in Ontario, the ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Payment Plan, offers barely $1,200 a month to a person and $250, that's for room and board, $250 for food. And there are so many restrictions on these folks that they're kept in a state of sub-poverty. Now, I wish we could say it was quote unquote only Ontario that has that program, but virtually every province in the country has an equivalent program. And so what we have are the the poorest of the poor in this country, you can say with certainty, are disabled people. And there's no way out. If they go out and if they're able to get a job, the money that they get from government is clawed back instead of allowing them to make some growth, enabling them to put something away, enabling them to, I don't know, buy a microwave or a hot plate or a new toaster. But the system does not allow it for them. And what bothers me so much about it is, first of all, you know, it's a ridiculous system. It's cruelty. If you did this to an animal, you'd be arrested. But we do it to people, and it makes no sense. Because if they were encouraged to get a job, if the ODSP system was set up to work towards getting these people jobs, they'd then become taxpayers. And if they became taxpayers, then the government would have more money for programs. I'm saying it with some degree of sarcasm, but it really does make you wonder.
You're a devoted Christian. We've seen several times in the Bible how Jesus heals those with disabilities, being the blind, those who can't walk. You say those accounts are ignored today by the church. Explain that for me.
Well, there's 37 miracles ascribed to Jesus Christ in the New Testament. And the vast majority of them are of people, disabled people, blind, the lame. You know, you go down the list, only a handful are not involving individuals who are suffering. And so that has always struck me just to begin with. Like, well, why was that the case? Well, it was to demonstrate his divinity. But there are many ways Christ could have demonstrated his divinity. He could have struck the Roman soldiers deaf and dumb. He could have paralyzed them right to the ground. He could have dealt adversely with the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So he could have done that, but he didn't. Instead, he went and hired and healed people with disabilities. So that's in the New Testament. Now we flash forward to our society, and we know that 22% of Canadian population are people with disabilities, and 25% of Indigenous people are those with disabilities. And you look at our own congregations and say, well, are we even close to 22%? And the answer is no.
Yeah.
And I think it's because in many, many instances, not all by any stretch, there's a number of notable examples of the alternative, but in many, many instances, the church is just not actively reaching out to such people.
Has the church entered into the conversation even of accessibility the way that it should?
I really don't think so. There may be examples I'm not aware of, but I really don't think so. And I think that's one of the things we need to do, is enter into that dialogue. And so far, we just haven't.
You talk about outreach to people with disabilities. I want to talk about you, David, and the fact that God has put you in such a great position to be this advocate when it comes to people with disabilities. Talk to me about how challenging that can be, and maybe just the frustrations, but why you continue to do it.
Well, I think it's because in our family, both my parents had a strong sense of justice, truly. It was extended to, I think, my siblings, we all kind of inherited that, a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong, and that you need to step up and be the one that intervenes. It does get you into trouble at some times, but that was definitely part of our growing up. I think with my dad being a lawyer, there was a very much, not legalistic, but a very strong sense of right and wrong there. And my mother certainly extended that too. So, you know, if you see something that's wrong and you're in a position to correct it, you need to go ahead and correct it.